There is a big misunderstanding about what LinkedIn is and what it isn't. LinkedIn is paid social. You can't tap into intent there in the same way that you can with Google. The best thing about LinkedIn ads is the targeting and your ability to get in front of your ICP regularly at scale. This has not been possible before LinkedIn ads.
It's our job to tell better stories. And always remember, it's the risk takers that are rewarded.
People are sick and tired of being marketed to, and they're sick and tired of being sold. The single biggest story today in sales and marketing is how our customers are buying differently.
Hello, Gabriel, and welcome to the Growth Hub podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Tel Aviv. I'm in a t-shirt. I can't complain.
Okay, that's not nice considering we're in Helsinki and it's not really that warm here at the moment.
Although it is nice and sunny outside. It's spring, obviously.
All right.
Right, so we are talking about a very specific, someone could say niche topic today, but it's not niche for you because it's something you do every day. So we're talking about LinkedIn ads. So it's something that B2B companies, I would hazard say probably every B2B company tries to use LinkedIn ads for their business. If not every, at least majority of it. But I think that I'm sure you've seen this and we've seen this. Many of the companies don't get the results that they want from those ads. So let's start with kind of what makes it so difficult to make LinkedIn ads work for companies.
First of all, there is a big misunderstanding about what LinkedIn is and what it isn't. LinkedIn is paid social. So you can't tap into intent there in the same way that you can with Google. The best thing about LinkedIn ads is the targeting and your ability to get in front of your ICP regularly at scale. And really, I like to think about it in a miraculous way. This has not been possible before LinkedIn ads. If you were running, marketing for a tech company, a B2B tech company, or even any sort of B2B company before LinkedIn ads, you really didn't have a lot of options in terms of getting in front of your target market. You had trade shows, you had trade magazines, and maybe once you could do Google, but only if they were searching for you. So this is really a big deal. And so within that, I think a lot of mistakes are around targeting. One really big mistake that we see being made is that there's no segmentation. And so companies will say, well, here's our ICP where we're targeting these companies, this company size, these job titles, and without any sort of regard to, how that's actually going to work in the real world, and whether or not, you should be targeting enterprises in the same campaign that you're targeting SMBs, and if you should be targeting CIOs in the same campaign that you're targeting IT managers. And even if it's not a messaging issue, even if the messaging is identical for everybody, which it probably should not be, even if that was the case, there's just so many more IT managers than there are CIOs. And with a limited budget, what ends up happening is that most of your budget is going to be going to what there is the most of. And so that's a big mistake that a lot of companies make, where they don't really segment out their targeting. Another big mistake is sort of expecting it to work differently than it is. And so, you can run a lead generation campaign and you can get leads, but those leads will probably not be as keen to speaking with you as somebody who, arrived to your website organically, is searching for you, and is asking for a demo. And so the handling of those leads, if that is what you're doing, if you're running a lead generation campaign, it needs to be different. And you can't just apply the same principles, the same tactics, the same playbook that you have with other channels, especially direct inbound to the leads coming in from LinkedIn. So those are a couple of the big ones that come to mind. A lot of misunderstanding around how the actual targeting works. So another big one that I like to talk about a lot is what you see is not always what you get. So for example, if you are targeting, say, a marketing specialist title on LinkedIn, that title itself contains almost any marketing title that exists. So that's the way that LinkedIn works. They'll associate, if your job title is, head of event marketing, you will also be targeted when somebody targets marketing specialist. Head of marketing, for example, if you target head of marketing, that targets any senior marketing title. So marketing director, CMO, VP marketing, head of growth, any sort of senior marketing title will fall under head of marketing. And there are all sorts of overlaps there as well. And that's usually okay, but a lot of mistakes I see quite often is people making exclusions. So they'll see a marketing specialist title come in and decide, all right, I need to exclude marketing specialist. And then suddenly their audience size gets really, really small and they don't understand why. The same is true for functions. People don't really understand how the functions work. And a really big example is business development as a function. So people, advertisers might see that they're getting all sorts of business development titles coming in. They're like, I don't want these titles. And so then they exclude business development as a function, but business development as a function actually includes within it senior titles, any sort of senior, like CEO, COO, CMO, founder, stuff like that. So when you're excluding business development as a function, you're also excluding all sorts of titles that you would have wanted. The same goes for seniority. And I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but seniorities as well. People will see, oh, I don't want entry level. I'm going to exclude entry level. But LinkedIn doesn't really know who's entry level and who's not. They have an algorithm. They have some sort of database where they say, okay, this job title equals that seniority. And they don't always get it right. So one big example I like to use is data scientist. Data scientist is a job title that LinkedIn, for what some reason or another, decides is entry level. And I've worked with some data scientists over the years, and they are anything but entry level. They're usually quite advanced in their careers. And so if you are trying to target data scientists and you are excluding entry level job titles because you don't want junior people that aren't decision makers, you very well may end up excluding the same people that you're trying to get. So those are some of the big mistakes I see people making quite often.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I have a lot of follow-up questions. But let's start with the targeting part of it, because
Sure.
You did say that targeting is one of the best features of LinkedIn, but then you gave us a long list of what makes it so
it's one of the big
difficult.
problems too.
So what do you think marketers how should they approach targeting on LinkedIn ads, and how can they kind of figure out, okay, what exactly are the titles, or is the titles even a good way to find the targeting? Like, how can we as marketers kind of figure our way out or figure our way into that?
As somebody who has seen and managed so many different accounts now for so many different verticals, I have really a trove of knowledge and experience and just memory about, oh, this means that and that means this, and I can kind of avoid some of the big mistakes. But if you're working in-house, if you've been let's say you've been running, even if you've been running LinkedIn ads before your previous company, and suddenly you're now at a new company, and maybe you were working for a company in MarTech, and now you're in cybersecurity, it's really a whole new world. And so if you are running campaigns for your company in-house, my biggest suggestion to you would be to learn. Like, you really have to take it upon yourself to learn your audience, to learn how all the different ways that you would be able to target your audience. And to do that, you have to actually try things, and you have to talk to people, and you have to learn, you have to ask. If you are now in cybersecurity, you have to learn and figure out all of the different ways that you would be able to reach your audience, and how do you do that in the most effective way, and reaching as many of them as you can, and also in the most efficient way, not targeting the people that you wouldn't want to target. And what are the trade-offs between those? Another really, really important thing is to consider, how much leverage do you have, or how much, I guess, leeway do you have? Are you, do you need to scale up massively, really, really quickly? Are you at, I don't know, $5,000 a month budget, and your boss is like, all right, we need to go all in now on LinkedIn ads, and here you have now $100,000 a month? Okay, it's a different story. You have to open things up, and you have to try a lot of things, and you have to be able to try to reach as many of the people in your audience as possible. Or have you been asked not to scale down because of the economy? You're at $30,000 a month, and now you've been asked to scale down to $10,000 a month. So how are you going to make things more efficient? How can you cut effectively? Should you be cutting in targeting, or should you be cutting regionally? Should you be cutting just by reducing bids and budgets? So you really have to have a learning mindset. If you haven't done it so far, if you're new, or if you've been recently assigned the task of managing LinkedIn ads for your company, you really have to put on that learning hat, even if you've done LinkedIn before, but not for your company or for this vertical. It really is different, and you have to learn all these little nuances. What I just said about data scientists earlier, you could be working on LinkedIn ads for years and years and years, but if you've never had to target data scientists, you might not have learned that. And you, even if you have been trying to, and you're not constantly trying to learn about your audience on LinkedIn, you might not pick that up. And so you have to both have that learning mindset and keep being curious about your audience, and not just your audience generally, not like your total addressable market audience on a strategic level, but really about your targetable audience on LinkedIn. I'll give you another example. E-commerce companies, right? So sometimes we'll work with clients that they have a solution for e-commerce companies. They have a tool, they have a checkout solution, they have a conversion optimization tool, whatever. They do something, they have an audience that they can only work with e-commerce companies. But on LinkedIn ads, there is no industry called e-commerce. It doesn't exist. You have retail and all sorts of retail. You have fashion, cosmetics, luxury goods, electronics, furniture, jewelry. There's all sorts of sub industries around retail that you could target that are essentially e-commerce. And if you've never done that before, you have to figure out what is the way to do that. And you can do that with lists, you can do that with just targeting these companies. There's all sorts of ways you could do that, and you need to kind of figure out what is the best way to do that. Where do I get to that sweet spot between being very, very focused and targeting as much of my audience as possible? You have to learn about how your audience is targetable on LinkedIn.
Wow, that's a whole lot of information there. Can I just, out of curiosity, how long did it take you to actually kind of feel like you're on top of things and kind of feel comfortable in LinkedIn? Or are you still doing the learning? You're eating the elephant bit by bit, aren't you?
So I'm going to give you an honest answer. I have a problem which is, no, really, I have a problem, which might explain some of how I've ended up here. But first of all, I become obsessed. I love digging into things. So like when I was younger and I was, really into obscure music, before we had MP3s, before we had iPods, I would go to the record store and I would look for just really, really rare releases, and I would listen. I would find out, all right, who are the musicians that worked on this one? Who's the producer? And I would find other things that they worked on. And when MP3s came out, I would download entire discographies and like, oh, this person also played with that person. That must be really cool. And I just become really obsessed and dig into things until I feel like I am intimately familiar with how they work from a 360-degree, perspective. And so it took me 2 days. I felt I'm also, and another problem I have is that I am, sometimes I am stupidly overconfident, and I like to try things. And one of the fortunate things that happened to me in my life is that when I became really interested in LinkedIn ads, this was at a time when there weren't a lot of other people very interested in LinkedIn ads, and there weren't a lot of other people testing this out. And so I was given a lot of freedom by some really great companies, some really, really fantastic B2B tech companies, and really, really fantastic VPs and CMOs there to just figure things out with really big budgets, because they trusted me, and I got to really kind of move fast and break things. And so I don't know if that would have been possible today. And I don't know if I came onto the scene today, I would have that same freedom because things are a lot more established. But back in 2015, 2016, there really weren't a lot of people doing this, and there weren't best practices, and there weren't podcasts that you could listen to and hear people like me talking about things like this. And so I just had to try. And there wasn't, even when things didn't work well, I think there was some freedom to say, okay, let's try something else, because we really want to figure it out.
So essentially, it has taken you, 8 years? You're still on that path?
2 days. I can tell you how long it takes my employees to learn. And I like to say, you can be up and running, managing campaigns within a week. The technical aspect of it is really simple. And if you have decent training, and you have, especially if you have some experience in Facebook ads or Google ads, and you understand kind of the fundamentals of digital marketing, right? Impressions and clicks and click-through rates and all that stuff, and conversion rates and ad copy, you can probably be running LinkedIn ads in days. To understand all of the intricacies, all of the scenarios that may arise for all of our different clients, it never really ends. And I usually within about 5 months, 8 months, my campaign managers are experienced enough to handle maybe 70%, 80% of the type of things that can come up for most of our clients, the types of issues that can arise, the types of problems, challenges. Suddenly, a client will ask us to run a type of campaign that is that we don't, run every day, a tactic or a playbook that is a little bit different, and then they'll come to me and I'll say, "Oh yeah, I did that a few years ago, and here's what you should do in that kind of situation." So you can get to a point where you're pretty confident and you're pretty strong in the platform, and you've seen quite a few things at this point after 4, 5, 7, 8 months. But then really it's the more time you spend in it, the better. I believe that, and the platform is always evolving. And then and that's the technical aspect of it. But then there's the strategic aspect of it, right? Like just because you understand the platform inside out doesn't mean you know what are the right things to do. Should we be running ABM or not? Should we be running demand generation or not? Should we be gating our content or not? How should we be handing off the leads to sales? How should we be qualifying the leads? What kind of feedback loop should we be looking at? How often should we be looking at the quality of leads? How should we handle that? How should we scale up? How should we scale down? How should our account be structured? These are not technical questions. These are not LinkedIn specific questions. These are strategy questions, marketing questions, B2B marketing questions. And so, this is something that really I never stop learning. In the last year, 2 years, I've started to really, really become interested in brand building, and I've been reading about it, and I've been talking about it, and I've been trying things. And how can we use a performance mindset when doing brand marketing, which is it's not simple. And so I think as long as you have this sort of like learning mindset, as long as you don't ever get to that point where like, I know everything, I've seen everything, you can't, you have nothing to teach me. As long as you're always trying to learn new things and try new things, you keep growing, and it is endless. I don't really see that there's a limit to it.
So how does a good LinkedIn ads campaign look like?
I don't know if there's a single answer to this. So what I would turn that around and say, for what purpose, right? So is this for demand generation? Is this for lead generation? Is the purpose here to get, and in most cases, when most companies come to us, despite what you'll read on LinkedIn about demand generation and about, all sorts of things, 9 times out of 10, the request is, we want leads. We want good leads, and we want our sales to have more leads than they could possibly handle.
That doesn't surprise me.
Number one. Yeah, that's the number one request that we get. And so usually when I'm talking about what does a good LinkedIn campaign look like, I'm looking at it from a lead generation perspective. But that is not the only playbook. That is not the only strategy. That is not the only way to judge the quality of a campaign. But for the sake of this question, I'm going to talk about it from that perspective. And so from that perspective, I would say a good campaign, first of all, is one where you are able to judge whether or not it's good, meaning you have the ability to say, are we getting good leads here at a good cost? And you're able to do that on a regular basis. So, and I'll give you a way to think about it like this. So first of all, you have to make sure you have enough budget. If you are trying to get leads at, say, I don't know, $200 cost per lead, let's say. That's the benchmark for whatever you're trying to do right now. It's $200 cost per lead. And you only have a LinkedIn ads budget of $1,000. That's about $33 a day, which means that on average, if your average cost per lead is $200, you may see a lead about once a week. And if you want to be able to, and you usually are going to want to segment your campaigns, like I mentioned, into different audiences, maybe different creative, test different things out against each other. You're not going to have the budget to do so. So you're going to have to go in every day and see, okay, what's my cost per lead here for the last 7 days? And if you don't have the data to make a decision about maybe 2 different things, what's working better than this thing, this campaign versus this campaign, or this audience versus that audience, or this content versus that content, this creative versus that creative, you're not going to have the ability to make decisions and make changes that will improve. And that really just limits your ability to do your job, to affect the outcome of the campaigns. And you kind of have to just hope that you're doing the right thing and hope that it's going to work out. So I think to answer the question, a good campaign is one in which you can make decisions on a daily basis if it is good compared to another campaign that you're running. And in order to do that, you have to have enough budget and enough data. The audiences should be not too small, not too large. And there are no iron laws here. Like, I'm sure there somewhere out there, somebody's running a campaign with 2 million people in there and it's doing great. I'm sure that somewhere out there, there's somebody running a campaign with 500 people and it's doing great, but the sweet spot's definitely in the middle there. So I would say that for most campaigns, you want to have somewhere between 10,000 or 15,000 people, and, on one end of the spectrum, and maybe 50, 80,000 on the other end of the spectrum. And it kind of depends on what kind of campaign that is as well. If you're talking about retargeting, it's okay if it's smaller. If you are talking about, if you have a large budget, the larger your budget is, it's probably better for your audiences to be larger. If you have a very limited budget, it's fine if your audiences are quite small. So if you really do only have, say, I don't know, $10,000 a month for your whole LinkedIn ads, that's only $333 per day. And if you're splitting that by 3 different campaigns, maybe 3 different regions or 3 different targeting types, it's about $100 per day. And that's not a lot of clicks. That's not a lot of impressions. So your audiences can be much smaller. But an important thing to take into consideration with LinkedIn ads, especially if you're coming to it from Facebook ads, is your reach and frequency on LinkedIn is lower. People don't go into LinkedIn as often as they do to other social networks. And so even if you have an audience size of 5,000 people, 10,000 people, some of those 10,000 people maybe only log into LinkedIn once a month. Maybe they never log into LinkedIn. And so you're only really going to be able to reach frequently a certain percentage of that. And that's going to be different depending on your audience. If they are, let's call them white collar workers or desk workers, they're going to be logging in more often. But if they're frontline workers, if they are doctors in hospitals, or if they're, I don't know, restaurant managers, they're on LinkedIn. You can target them and you'll be able to get leads from these people. But the percentage of your audience that is going to be going on a regular basis is lower, which means that you may need a larger audience in order to reach more of them. These are things you have to think about or you don't necessarily have to think about them, I'll be honest, but if things are not working, if things are not functioning, if you're not able to spend your budget, if you're not getting clicks, if you're not getting impressions being served, that might be one of the problems.
Many companies, they do have advertising strategy, and LinkedIn is not the only medium in it. So how do you see, what is the role of LinkedIn in B2B advertising strategy, in your opinion?
I truly believe that any company in B2B should be involving LinkedIn ads and LinkedIn in general, not just LinkedIn ads, but organic LinkedIn in their go-to-market strategy, their marketing and sales strategy that works together. Now, is it something that any company can run, at scale and get really, really great results? Not necessarily, but I think everybody should be there to some degree. So first of all, I think it depends on what is your go-to-market strategy. Are you doing, a sales-led motion, product-led growth? Is it, are you strictly ABM? And if you're strictly ABM, do you have any other options? So one of our clients, for example, is strictly ABM. They have no other option to reach their audience than LinkedIn ads, because there's no other way to get so specific with the types of companies, the only types of companies they can work with. they can sell to other than LinkedIn ads. Now, whether or not that then can become a successful lead generation strategy, it's not a given. But just because you can't necessarily run a successful lead gen strategy does not mean you shouldn't be there. And that's true for everything. Not every type of product, not every type of company should be running lead generation. Not every type of company should be looking at their ads from a performance perspective. And sometimes companies will come to us and say, hey, we really want to run LinkedIn ads. But if their, I don't know, if their cost per customer, or if their lifetime value is, I don't know, $100 or $200, then there's probably no way that LinkedIn ads can be a profitable channel from a performance marketing perspective. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be on LinkedIn ads, and it doesn't mean that they can't use LinkedIn ads to help build their brand or help generate demand or help, stay in front of the most important people that they should be staying in front of.
So in a paid advertising strategy, obviously there has to be every channel that a company uses, there has to be a role for each channel. And then I guess at that point we come back to what you were talking about earlier, understanding the customer and understanding what they do in each channel and where they are and how they use each of those. So would you say that, finding out the role of LinkedIn ads in the paid ads strategy has to go through that kind of research process?
Yeah, I'll take that and I'll kind of give it a little twist. I would say you have to understand what role the LinkedIn ads can play in your strategy. And, if your audience is too small, you probably can't look at LinkedIn ads for lead generation. If your audience is very, very, very large and you don't have a big budget, you can't necessarily look at LinkedIn ads to build a brand because you're not going to be able to spend enough money to compete, with brand building. So you have to understand kind of where are you in your strategic landscape, and where LinkedIn fits in that. What is achievable for you on LinkedIn, and to do that, you have to have an understanding of, the size of your audience, the size of your budget relative to the size of your audience, how mature your marketing assets are, how well they'll be received there, how well do you know your customer? Can you go to your customer and say, hey, would you like a demo request? Or can't you? And if you can or can't, is that because of you or is that because of them? Some audiences, like very technical audiences, they're not as interested in demo requests. They're not as interested in talking to sales. And some are. Some really, sometimes, and I've seen this, there are certain product market fits that the audience is hungry for your solution, and there is pent-up demand, and a demo request campaign will work really, really well. And so you need to know that. Whether or not you run it or not, you need to know what you can and can't do. And in order to do that, you just have to, before you can really, this is the sentence that you're going to use. Before you can figure out what your LinkedIn ad strategy is, you have to figure out what your LinkedIn ad strategy can be. And a lot of mistakes that I see, a lot of clients come to us and say, this is our strategy for LinkedIn. And a lot of times I'll say, you can't do that. Your audience is too small, or your audience is too large, or your budget is too low, or you don't have the content for that. Or these are very technical people. They're not going to be interested in this kind of strategy. Or, it's too enterprise. They're going to need more content. You're going to need, so you have to understand the viability of what is possible. You have to understand, not just know your audience and know your customer, but really know what the constraints are on LinkedIn, how targetable, quote unquote, is your audience on LinkedIn? So I mentioned targetability. Are you going to have a problem reaching them? Are they vague? I'll give you another really quick example. I know we're running out of time, but I'll give you another really quick example where we have a client that only targets the insurance industry. But within the insurance industry, the job titles, the personas that they are working with are very vague. They could be, project managers. They can have like very vague, like vice president of strategic initiatives, stuff like that. And so then, targetability becomes an issue. Yes, you can reach them broadly, but sometimes you can't. And so you have to understand what you can and can't do here reasonably before you can really develop a strategy. And so what I would say is you have to have spent some time running ads before you can really come up with your LinkedIn ad strategy. You have to have some data about how much, how many people you can reach here, at what cost, how they're engaging with your messaging. Do you have a messaging problem that you need to be working on before you can scale up? That has to be part of your strategy then. You have to have tactics within there to be testing out different messaging. Do you have a content problem? Is that part of it? So you really have to know what is sticking and what isn't, what can work technically with your audience before you can come up with your grand LinkedIn ad strategy.
So what is, we've been talking about lead gen here, but what is the best use of LinkedIn ads? Do you see that it works better for kind of awareness or top of mind, or does it work better for like high intent bottom of the funnel campaigns? Is it either or?
So it leans towards top of funnel. It leans towards building demand. That isn't to say that you cannot run it and get high intent leads, but it comes at a cost. It's not ideal for that. It's ideal for reaching your audience. It's ideal for getting in front of the right people, but it's not ideal for knowing when is the right time. And so there are limitations to that, and there are constraints with that and challenges around that you have to, if that is what you need to do, if you just need leads and your CEO and your CFO are breathing down your neck and they're saying, we don't care about brand. If we don't get a million leads by next week, we're going out of business, then that's what you got to do. And you can do it. It's usually, not always, it's usually possible to do it. But if you have the buy-in from leadership to build a brand on LinkedIn, magic can happen because you have the ability to reach a very, very high percentage of your total addressable market at scale consistently. And when you do that, when you can do that, almost certainly your competitors are not doing that. And you can almost certainly build a brand, which is incredible. Like if you know how to do that and you have buy-in for that and you have budget for that and you can execute, brand worthy creative, then like magic happens for sure.
I want to talk about money. I want to talk
Who
about
doesn't?
money. Yes. It's kind of the common comment that we get that LinkedIn is so expensive. But is it actually? Do you think that?
Anytime I'll hear a statement like that, the question is always compared to what? And, yes, compared to Facebook ads, or at least how Facebook ads was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, it's the clicks are more expensive. But, compared to what? And so if you are targeting enterprise companies, then no, because you're not going to be able to target enterprise company, or at least the percentage of enterprise companies that you're going to be getting from Google or Facebook is much lower. And so if you're comparing cost per MQL or cost per relevant lead even, among different platforms, quite often LinkedIn will end up being cheaper. If you're talking about cost per acquiring a customer, it kind of depends, and it depends on what you're comparing it to and how you're comparing it. So, if you're comparing it versus brand campaigns on Google, yeah, it's expensive. Or if you're comparing it to Google and you're including brand campaigns in that calculation, then yeah, it's going to be expensive. So it really kind of depends. The clicks are not cheap generally, but I found that for competitive keywords on Google, the clicks are not cheap anymore either. And I found that for good audiences on Facebook, the clicks are not cheap either. And so I don't really think of it as very, very expensive. I will say this. I will say, like, when companies come to us and they ask us, what is the minimum investment for LinkedIn? I do say, we should be running at around $15,000 a month to start with, so that we can test out enough things and have enough budget on a daily basis so that we can learn. Whereas with Google, for example, you don't have to start off with such a high budget. You can kind of build it slowly. And all right, let's start with $1,000 here and $2,000 there, and learn and fine tune and all of that stuff. So in terms of an investment overall, to say, all right, I need to invest in this channel for 3 months, 6 months. Yeah, it's not a cheap investment. You're going to spend, with manpower and or agency costs, anywhere between, or you should be spending anywhere between, $50,000 and $100,000 to validate it as a channel. And yeah, that's not cheap for sure. But
yeah, that's I can imagine that a lot of marketers and companies just got a heart attack when they heard that number. But I was wondering, do you see any point in doing LinkedIn ads or running LinkedIn ads with just like 2,000 to 5,000 euro per month budgets?
Yeah, 100%. But you should just adjust your expectations. So, at 2,000 or a few $1,000s a month, whoever's running it, you might be running it a week and then maybe stopping for a little while, or running it for a few weeks and stopping it for a while. Or you might be only running retargeting campaigns, or you might try something and it might not work and you pause it and you restart it but it's not the same as a machine. Like what we try to do, at least at my agency, is to help our clients build some sort of machine, some sort of lead generation machine, a brand building machine. We want to build infrastructure so that it is something that can help the company grow. And if you're not starting with enough budget, you're not going to get there. You're not going to get to the machine. Now, you might get there eventually, but it's just going to take a lot longer. But 100%, I would say anybody, any company running that is in B2B, you should be doing something on LinkedIn ads. Maybe it's just retargeting with text ads. Maybe it's just, running, a campaign just to validate some messaging, or just to kind of get in front of a really, 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 really small segment of your audience, just to like get in front of them. I don't know, 20 companies that you just really want to get in front of, and just get in front of them. But it's not the same as building some sort of performance marketing program and lead generation machine. And so, as an agency, I'm brought on to build that machine. And so for us, yeah, there is a minimum, and it doesn't make sense to bring on an agency for such a small budget, at least for us. But I would, if I were doing it in-house, or sometimes CEOs will come to me of kind of smallish startups, 8 people or 12 people, and they haven't even raised any money yet, and they want to look into it, and they ask, and I say, you do it for yourself. I'll, so if it's a friend of mine, I'll teach them a few tricks, or I'll set them up, or if, maybe I'll take some money for consulting and just kind of set them up a little bit. But you do it. You don't need an agency. You do it and set this up and learn about it, and learn about your audience, and be there. Don't not be there. Everybody should be right. Anybody in B2B, and not just in tech. B2B is so much more than tech. You know, if you are in manufacturing, if you are in healthcare, if you are like, there's so much in B2B that's beyond tech, and so many more companies that can be, you know, really just get your feet wet, just start getting a taste of, see what is out there for you. You might be surprised. And yeah, maybe it's never going to be viable for you, but at least, you know, learn and have that and get that experience. Yeah, so for sure, even with a small budget, start learning, start being there, start testing it around. Maybe, and I've seen this sometimes, maybe with some luck, you get some really great results with a small budget. And you've validated the channel and you're just like, wow, this is actually something that could be really great. And then you can go to an agency and say, hey, let's scale this thing up together. So you never know.
I love how passionate you are about this. It's awesome.
It's a weird thing. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would be so passionate about LinkedIn ads, I would think you're crazy.
Where do you see that LinkedIn is actually going at the moment? Like, what does your crystal ball say?
Look, right now it's amazing, and LinkedIn is growing, and LinkedIn ads is an opportunity for us is growing, and you know, B2B marketing is growing, and tech is growing, and everything is you know, we're in a crazy time, of course, but the overall trend is growth. But things are crazy. We're in a crazy world, and things are changing very quickly. And who's to say that, you know, ChatGPT won't invent the next LinkedIn in 3 years and we'll be on something else? I have no idea. We're in a really weird time in human history. And so to take one platform and guess where it's going to be in 5 or 10, I have no clue.
So we have our final Fast 5 segment left, which is 5 simple questions and 5 simple answers. So Gabriel, short answers, please.
Okay, sorry.
So you ready?
Yeah.
What book or books are you currently reading?
I am reading a biography of Paul McCartney from the years after he left the Beatles.
A SaaS company you love and why?
Gong. Always loved Gong. Udi and I work together, and I just love to see how you know, how that company has evolved, how their marketing has evolved, and I think it's a great product, and I love them.
What is your favorite place to read about growth?
LinkedIn. I like to go onto LinkedIn, and I will. You know, there are a few people I follow, and you know, I'll come across some really great posts occasionally, and that's my favorite place to read about growth.
What is the most important growth metric in your opinion?
Money. Revenue. That is it. You can't hide. At the end of the day, that's all. You know, this is a business. If we're in, you know, nonprofit growth, it would be something else. If we were in, you know, if we were in politics, we would be looking at votes. But we're in business, money.
And finally, what is your best piece of advice for fellow marketers?
Experiment, try things, do things, build things. If you have spent a month and you have not done something new, tried something new, talked to somebody new, you are dying. You are missing out. You are going to be left behind. You have to stay curious. You have to stay passionate. If you're not, either do something about it or move on.
Fantastic. Well,
right.
Gabriel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Likewise, this has been great.
That's it. Thanks everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Let's keep the conversation going on Twitter at SaaS Growth Hub or LinkedIn at the SaaS Growth Hub podcast.
And if you don't want to miss the next episode, make sure you subscribe to the Growth Hub on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or right here on YouTube.